Part in a Flypast to mark the 50th anniversary of one of the world's busiest airports.
Welcome to London Heathrow and to the final day of celebrations which have marked the airport's 50 years as the aviation hub of the world. A few days ago, Her Majesty the Queen revisited Terminal 2, which she first opened in 1955. And all week, crowds have been flocking to the airport's new visitor centre, the heart of the Heathrow 50th Festival. From here, a special time tunnel has been built to transport visitors through the decades, back to 1946 and the original Heathrow, one terminal made of tents. Today, we'll be looking at how the airport celebrated its anniversary, and as airports are nothing without passengers, how travelling's changed over the last 50 years for people who've passed through its terminals. Now, Heathrow's story is one of a changing world where flying has become commonplace and travelling to far-flung cities no longer a distant dream. For a few minutes this afternoon, normal operations will be put on hold for a unique fly-past of aircraft which is due to pass overhead. Julian Tutt will be looking at the aircraft for us.
Well, conditions aren't bad, just the odd heavy shower around for this rare moment in aviation that's been organised by the RAF Benevolent Fund. We'll be seeing over 30 aircraft from the de Havilland Rapide to the Boeing 777 via the Red Arrows and Concorde. 50 years of aviation history compressed into a quarter of an hour. The M25 shows up clearly on Thames radar, which tracks the approaching formation on its route over the City of London and along the Thames. From its departure airfield, 15 miles away at Stansted in Essex, where Raymond Baxter, who's been flying in and out of Heathrow for 50 years, is watching.
And who, 50 years ago, would have imagined that superb modern building, Stansted's new passenger terminal, springing up in the heart of the Essex countryside? Since yesterday, we here have been enjoying a sort of time warp experience watching the runway as the aircraft of yesteryear have mingled with the routine traffic of today. A truly amazing collection of contrasting civil aircraft and a sight probably never to be seen again in one place, so savor every second of it. The performance ranging from 150 miles an hour to twice the speed of sound. Engine output from 250 horsepower to 47,000 pounds of thrust, and range from across the Channel and back to 5,000 miles non-stop. A unique celebration of a proud anniversary and a staggering illustration of the rate of progress in a mere 50 years. And here's an old-timer which brings back many happy memories, the dear old Bristol freighter. Back in the 50s, it operated the first car-carrying air ferry across the Channel. A firm called Silver Cities ran them from Lydd to Le Touquet. And even when our children were quite small, my wife and I would pack them into the car with all the kit, rush down to catch the aeroplane, and then drive on down to the Alps or the Mediterranean or wherever the sun was shining. Great days. But in fact, the old freighter only just made this great day. Captain John Duncan is the man who leads the team that got her here. A bit of a close call, John.
Yes, indeed, Raymond. Yes, the team worked very well. We managed an air test last night at 10 o'clock. There were a few things came out of that, and so they were working through till about 3 o'clock this morning, and here we are.
I noticed she was smoking rather nicely as she came in. Standard practice on these engines?
Yes, I was rather hoping you hadn't noticed that, but yes, it is. It's fairly common to get a little bit of smoke at idle, yeah.
Congratulations to all of your team.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Well, back here at the top of the control tower, you can see we've got a fantastic view of the airport behind, arguably one of the best seats in the house. Now, today this is something of a concrete metropolis, but of course it wasn't always like this. This flat land behind me here was formed 25 million years ago. But even when this first became an airfield, it was still surrounded by market gardens. But then Heathrow's had many different faces over the ages.
250 years ago, the ancient village of Heathrow overlooked Hounslow Heath, a happy hunting ground for highwaymen. Legend has it that Dick Turpin sheltered in the Green Man Inn at Hatton, from where coach passengers on the Bath Road will be told to stand and deliver. By the First World War, the Heath had become a training aerodrome for the Royal Flying Corps. Sopwith camels bounced around on grass strips. In 1929, Richard Fairey bought 150 acres, and gradually the Great West Aerodrome took shape. Here, in the largest hangar of its type in the world at the time, the Fairey, Firefly and Swordfish, the old string bag, were born. But the first big development started towards the end of the war. The standard RAF triangular pattern of runways was built, each 100 yards wide, to take the heavy transport aircraft needed for the war in the Far East. In 1947, plans were drawn up for a massive expansion at Heathrow, by now London's main civil airport. There were to be 3 sets of parallel runways, 9 in all, with 3 to the north of the Bath Road. That never happened, but the new central area of terminals did, linked by tunnels under the northern runway to the outside world. By 1955, much of Hatton had given way to huge new hangars. Heathrow today has just 2 main east-west runways, considerably lengthened, with a third little-used one. Terminal 4 is to the south, and to the west, the sewage works at Perry Oaks, the planned site of Terminal 5. Heathrow now covers nearly 3,000 acres, with highway robbery no longer a threat. More international passengers pass through the 4 terminals here than any other airport in the world, with up to 1,300 aircraft movements a day. Around 90 airlines fly from Heathrow, but it wasn't always so.
They call it Heathrow locally. It was in April 1944 that history came to these country fields. An airport was required to finish off the Japanese. An immediate need with an eye to the peaceful future. That was the beginning.
In 1946, with 1 runway complete, the airport was handed over to civilian control.
This proving flight starts off from Heathrow, which will be the future civil airport of London.
The first plane to take off from Heathrow was a Lancastrian. The first terminal building was made from canvas and duckboards, but there were few complaints.
I think so many people had never flown by air before, and and let's face it, rationing was still on. I think it just accepted that the English way of muddling through, you could interpret all this as.
A new decade, a new monarch, and with it a renewed sense of optimism. Britain was rebuilding, and Heathrow was no exception. For its time, it was a revolutionary design, a tunnel built under the runway which connected the outside world to a smart, new, purpose-built terminal. Heathrow quickly became a fashionable watering hole, a place to see and be seen.
We wanted to be there where the action was and be seen to be there where the action was. It was just a very, very glamorous place to be. And the afternoons were rounded off with high tea in the Vanguard restaurant, which was run by 14. It was a very, very grand affair.
Then came the swinging 60s. Heathrow became the stopping-off point for the rich and famous. But it wasn't just celebrities who used Heathrow. The 1960s heralded the age of mass travel. 2 new terminals were opened to accommodate the growth. It was another Royal Heathrow occasion.
For many months, London Airport has been preparing for the day when the doors of the first jumbo jet opens, and out come the equivalent of 10 double-decker busloads of people, plus all their luggage. London Airport is geared for the flying revolution, which will enable more people than ever before to take to the air and visit those faraway places.
The new big jets brought a huge upsurge in long-distance travel. Heathrow was bursting, and Terminal 4 was opened in 1986. The Spartan design of the check-in area was deliberate to discourage long farewells. But once airside, shopping arcades were built to rival Knightsbridge. 54 million passengers a year now pass through Heathrow on their way to 220 destinations around the world. 26,000 cups of tea and coffee are served daily, 6,500 sandwiches are eaten.
Pack up, let's fly away.
All beyond the wildest dreams of Heathrow's aviation pioneers. And did you know we buy a staggering 1 million gallons of wines and spirits from those duty-free shops every single year? Now, obviously, Heathrow is nothing without passengers, and it can certainly boast a lot of those. A few days ago, I took a little trip round Terminal 3, and I bumped into quite a few people who remembered Heathrow as it once was.
Well, of course, in 1949, Heathrow was quite a small airport, and there were propeller-driven airplanes. I think we only had one terminal then, and it was easy. Then it got very complicated. Lots of terminals, very hard to get from one terminal to the other, but now it's very well organized.
We used to bring our daughter, when she was a baby there, up here to see the plane. Then we went down to Plymouth, but each time we've come up to, you know, we've seen such a difference. Now it's sort of, well, it's amazing, really. You know.
It's like comparing that as a postage stamp on a present-day full-size newspaper opened out.
Why do you love flying so much?
It gives you another, you know, you think of another world entirely. Like you are in another world entirely, that God is so great. How did he make this kind of a thing happen? You know what I'm saying? Like the plane and everything, it's beautiful. I love it. I love flying.
I guess you'd have to say that it was an awfully nice little airport then, and now it's an awfully nice, very big airport.
While life goes on here at Stansted, the stars of the show await their cue for the Flypast. Here, for example, the de Havilland Rapide, which first flew in 1934. An extremely elegant little fabric-covered biplane and a charming reminder of the days when air travel was a luxury for the well-to-do individual. Compare that with the rugged structure pioneered by the Americans. Yet this, the Douglas DC-3 Dakota, first flew only 1 year later in 1935 and is still earning its commercial living. This one was built in 1943 and is owned and operated by Captain Andrew Dixon and his wife Geraldine. He flies it, she takes care of the nosh. The DC-3's successor, the DC-4, which entered commercial service in the United States in the mid-1940s. This one, operated by South African Airlines, is on a world tour from Cape Town, and it too is still earning its keep.
We started off on the 22nd of April with a flying safari through Africa, taking in destinations such as Victoria Falls, Lake Kariba, Kilimanjaro and Luxor in Egypt, on the way to Düsseldorf, where we dropped our first group of passengers off. From there, we left with the second group of passengers on a 2-week air cruise through Scandinavia, all the way up to Noordkap, which is the northernmost point of the European continent at 71.5 degrees north. And yesterday, we dropped our passengers off in Helsinki, especially to be able to participate in the Flypast at Heathrow today.
And here, last amongst the world's first, the de Havilland Comet 4C jet airliner Canopus. And because it was the world's first jet airliner, the Comet automatically produced the world's first licensed jet airliner captain, John Cat's Eyes Cunningham, so called because he was a brilliant night fighter pilot during the war. And later, as chief test pilot at de Havilland's, he flew the maiden flight of the Comet, and then with Hawker Siddeley, the Trident, as well as many other major achievements. Canopus is now operated by the Royal Air Force Experimental Establishment at Boscombe Down.
It's delightful. Obviously, it's one of the oldest airplanes we've got. It's frankly a little bit of a handful compared to the modern airliners, but absolute delight to fly, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to fly an airplane of this vintage, frankly. It is the last Comet, it's the last Comet in the world, in fact, to be flying. It never was an airliner, but it's obviously a Comet Mark 4C airliner derivative. We use it as a lab airplane, so it's wall-to-wall crates, iron crates and wires and pieces of electrical equipment. In fact, we just returned from the North Pole where we've been checking out some kit in the North Pole, namely global positioning systems and inertial navigation systems. It still fulfills the role, and it has only got 8,000 hours, which is very few hours compared to an airliner. So in reality, it's still a young airplane in airframe hours, bought and paid for, and everybody loves it.
Around 150,000 people pass through Heathrow's 4 terminals every day. Checking in is all done by computer nowadays, but 50 years ago, it would have been a very different story. Then only the rich could afford to fly, but even so, conditions were very primitive. A tent like this would have been Heathrow's one and only terminal building. Everything would have happened under canvas: passports, customs, check-in, departure. Because aircraft could only carry a handful of passengers, flying was a very intimate experience. Now, waiting outside would have been a converted Lancaster bomber. On board, air hostesses like Juliette, whose job was to make life as pleasant and as comfortable as possible for the passengers. Not an easy task, given the conditions inside.
They were very small, because they only carried 12 passengers. And all passengers had to have oxygen masks because the aircraft weren't pressurized, and you couldn't fly over 10,000 feet without having oxygen because you'd pass out.
All completely different from the luxury of flying today.
Everything's in front of you, as you can see now, and just by pressing this button, your screen just pops out and twists round. It has 50 different channels of films, and you've got the news from London every day. So you're always kept up to date, even from news to films.
We didn't have the videos and those sort of things, of course. We used to give them the magazine Penguin to read, and apart from that, we had to make the journey, which was a long journey, as fun as we could ourselves, and make them all feel they were one big family.
But not all passengers were willing to play happy families. One Noel Coward proved a little difficult.
Having come on a pressurized aeroplane as far as Nassau, he was rather peeved to find that he was now in a little aeroplane with no pressurization, everything rather primitive. And he used to complain quite a bit, actually.
The first passenger jet, the Comet, was designed to make life a little more comfortable, but the hostesses still had their problems.
In those days on the Comet, we didn't have trolleys at all. All drinks, meals, anything that the passenger required was all served from a tray. And the same with the drinks. All the drinks were served. We didn't have little tins of soda water in those days. We all carried a soda siphon on our little fingers.
We had to wash up and wash up and wash up mountains of crockery before we landed. There were some places where you could offload the crockery for washing, but there were some places where we were told, don't do this on pain of death, because it's very expensive at this particular airport.
At the back of the Comet, it was so noisy, and we invented our own sort of sign language.
We still use
the
T for a cup of
and
tea,
the coffee.
and the little C.
That's right.
And the O for the orange juice.
That's right. Well, it all started, I'm sure, on Comets from the back of the aircraft. Did you have milk?
No, we didn't do that.
And water?
No, we didn't do that one either.
There were quite a lot. I can't remember all of them now.
Hostesses were felt by many to epitomise glamour, but the job was far from easy.
It was glamorous on the ground, but nobody could say it was glamorous in the air, because, I mean, we had no pressurized cabins and our ankles swelled up and all the passengers were sick, and it was not a glamorous job up there. But on the ground, yes, because we had a lot of time off.
Heather Ashley was issued with a handbook on how to be glam.
It was called BEA, Be Elegant Always. And it told us about dressing deportment, how to sit properly, how to stand, keep your head up, always keep your knees and thighs together, sit with one foot slightly behind the other, and just be poised and elegant at all times.
So did all that enable them to meet their millionaires?
I've often read that all the girls married rich men, but I think I missed out somewhere. I married a pilot. They weren't all that rich.
And so now here at Stansted, the stars of the show prepare to take the stage. Although, of course, every aircraft in the Flypast is a star in its own right. There go the two little Gypsy 6s on the Rapide, 200 horsepower apiece, 160 miles an hour cruising speed, call it 140 for comfort. What a contrast with the red arrows parked behind it. And here's the Comet, 4 Rolls-Royce Avon engines, and you'll notice how they are built into the wing, in contrast to the American practice of hanging them in pods underneath. The de Havilland Comet, beloved of all its pilots because it was one of those very, very few civil airliners which could claim to be overpowered. Coming bang up to date, the Douglas DC-8. You see the point about the engines being in pods under the wing, and compare the size of those engines with the engines of the Comet, which were in their day the most powerful in the world. And just watch that rotation. And now, as they take off to form up for the Flypast, one by one, we see the aircraft which mark the milestones of progress along the path of civil aviation.
Hello, London Tower. This is Charlie Fox Peter Baker Dog. Request landing instruction. Over.
After the war, it was the DC-3 which laid the foundation for airline services around the world, changing the face of civil aviation forever. The Lockheed Constellation also became a familiar sight at Heathrow, opening up transatlantic flights, if you could afford the £93 one-way ticket to New York. The Boeing Stratocruiser introduced a new level of passenger comfort with BOAC in the 50s. While the British-built Vickers Viscount radically improved short and medium-haul travel. Its turboprop engines produced a far smoother ride than any piston-engined aircraft at the time. Britain also led the way in the jet age. Its superior engine technology had given airframe manufacturers like de Havilland a 10-year advantage over its rivals. The Comet, in service with BOAC in 1952, became the world's first jet airliner. But then disaster struck. Metal fatigue caused 3 aircraft to disintegrate in mid-air. The problems were resolved with the Comet 4, which remained in airline service around the world until 1980. But Britain had lost its advantage to the Boeing 707 and new economy fares, which made long-distance travel possible for millions more. Vickers Armstrong countered with the VC-10, which proved successful in hot and high climates, but failed to penetrate the all-important American market. The success of the 707 led in the 70s to the 737, the most successful jet airliner in history. The Hawker Siddeley Trident boasted another British innovation, an all-weather, fully automatic landing system, used for the first time here at Heathrow in 1973. But it was the Jumbo which was to have the biggest impact ever on airline passenger travel. The Boeing 747, which first flew in 1969, spawned a new age of intercontinental leisure travel and a new headache for airports. And there were other barriers being broken in the 1960s. The Anglo-French caviar and champagne Concorde will survive, amazingly, well into the next century. It paved the way for unprecedented European cooperation, which has resulted in the Airbus consortium and its most advanced aircraft, the long-range twin-engined A330. Europe now competes with America head-to-head in almost every sector of the airliner market. The latest Boeing airliner is the 777. Twin-engine jets now fly enormous distances, cutting even further the cost of intercontinental travel.
Well, no aviation program looking back over the past 50 years would be complete without the Trident. It was a common sight in the 1960s, and the aircraft is fondly remembered by many people, not least the Trident Preservation Society. Over the last couple of years, this group of engineers have lovingly restored this Trident 3B, which last flew in 1985.
It's really been a case of giving up everything at the weekend. I mean, certainly fortunately we're restoring it during the summer months, so we'd be like on the aircraft sort of first thing in the morning and working through until sort of 8, 9 o'clock at night. So you didn't get much time down the pub or anything like that.
So the Flypast aircraft have left Stansted Airport. They're due to arrive behind me here on the north runway in the next few minutes. Now, Heathrow has never staged an air show quite like this before. You can imagine the sorts of preparations that have gone into sorting all of this sort of thing out, especially when you think 1,100 aircraft go in and out of this place every single day. Given the amount of preparation, I should think this is the only Flypast to happen for a while to come yet.
Well, we've been getting tremendously excited here, watching the radar screens and watching the approach of the formation. We can't actually see the first two aircraft. Here we're inside the Rapide, which is leading the formation. We've already seen those, of course, at Stansted. There, the cramped cockpit of the Rapide. We can't see their actual idents on the radar, just a blip. And here they are now coming in live over, well, that's probably just Osterley Park, about a couple of miles or so to run to Heathrow. This is all being conducted in silence, and the radar operators are able to track it with the squawk idents. It shows exactly which aircraft is where. Tremendous sight of all the aircraft. They're all a long way out, and there's the Lancaster coming in at 150 knots, 300 feet above the ground. The City of Lincoln from the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, which has come up from behind, underflying the Rapides, to eventually lead the formation as it crosses the threshold. And there it goes. And the Lancaster represents the BOAC Lancastrian, the aircraft that took off from here 50 years ago on the 28th of May to land 63 hours later in Sydney in Australia. Its maximum range, amazingly, was over 4,000 miles, and on the Australia route carried just 6 passengers, each having a bunk, an armchair and a table. Even so, conditions on board these converted bombers lack the elegance and luxury of the old pre-war flying boats of Imperial Airways. And the two de Havilland Rapides. Like the Lancaster, this robustly designed aircraft flew in both civil and military colours. During the war, it flew with the Royal Air Force as the Dominie, but by 1945, it was already looking fragile next to the all-metal monoplanes being built in the 1940s. And there, the magnificent sight of the Bristol freighter, the one that only just made it after working through the night. It was designed in the last years of the war to carry a 3-ton payload, including heavy trucks and guns, 28 stretchers and attendants, 36 fully equipped troops, or 23 paratroopers or other military loads into the Burmese jungle. To the left of it, the twin-engine de Havilland Dove, flown by British Airways 747-400 pilot Captain Bill Pritchard. It first flew in 1945, and it's one of the very few aircraft still flying whose parts, the engine, propeller and airframe, were all made by the same manufacturer. On this side of it, the de Havilland Heron. One of two Dakotas, the DC-3, the backbone of the world's airline fleet for both cargo and passengers after the war. Remarkably still in service 60 years after it first flew. Known also as the Skytrain, Dizzy-3, the C-47, that was the military designation, the Goonie Bird, and Puff the Magic Dragon after its exploits in Vietnam. It was the first civil airliner to make money from just carrying passengers without government help and without having to rely on mail services. Next, the DC-4 from South African Airways, the one we've already seen, the Skymaster. This was another remarkable American wartime aircraft that slipped gracefully from military to civil duties. First flew in 1938, and it featured unheard of passenger comforts such as air conditioning and sleeping berths. This one actually was the last one ever built, and it was virtually hand-built because the production line was already making DC-6s. Actually delivered to South African Airways in 1947. Now the faster aircraft coming in at 150 knots, 500 feet above the ground. The DC-6, it was bigger, flew faster and went further than the DC-4. The DC-6, the Constellation and the Stratocruiser were the last generation of piston engine airliners. In fact, the DC-6 was one of the most economical piston engine transports ever built. This one went to China Air Transport in October 1958, then various American operators before Air Atlantique bought it in 1987. The Vickers Viscount. That America didn't totally dominate the world market in the 50s was due to the success of British aircraft like this one, which resulted from Britain's excellence in engine design. Vickers supplied 60 customers worldwide, including BEA, who started with 20 and finished with over 80. The Handley Page Herald on the near side. Another example of Britain's prolific post-war aircraft industry. The de Havilland Comet, with its metal fatigue problems, made an inauspicious start. But when the Mark IV finally arrived, the world's first jet airliner proved its worth. Dramatically faster than its propeller-driven forebears, it slashed journey times around the globe. This Mark IV-C X-Ray Sierra 235 from the Heavy Aircraft Test Squadron at Boscombe Down is, as we've heard, the last Comet still flying, and sadly there are plans to dispose of it at the end of this year. A military development of the Comet, of course, is still flying, the Nimrod maritime patrol aircraft. Wonderful view that hasn't been seen for many a long time as the Comet passes over Heathrow with London in the background. The wealthy entrepreneurs out there who would like to keep it going, it may well be available at the end of the year. Among the Comet's American rivals, as well as the Boeing 707, was the DC-8. It was faster, had a greater range, and carried over twice as many passengers. With so-called hush-kitted engines, that's like a silencer on a car, it became popular with freight operators. In fact, the first all-cargo DC-8 flew in 1962. Since then, it's been stretched, re-engined and upgraded, and there are well over 300 still in service. This one flown by Captain John Crouch, who's got 31 years airline experience in the United States. Britain's attempt to corner the short and medium-haul jet market was the BAC 111, replacing the Viscount. It first flew in 1963, and American Airlines ordered 16 that year. But its potential as a world beater was never realized, as the greater selling power of the big American manufacturers saw it off. This one, Mike Tango, was once a regular visitor to Heathrow with BEA and then British Airways. Now part of the AB Shannon fleet, part of Air Bristol Group. They operate 3 111-500s. $230 were built here, and a few others were assembled in Romania. Next, the Boeing 727, which underlined Boeing's domination of the civil airliner market. This one in Iberia colours, but they've now replaced them with the A320. It's a short to medium haul transport with, unusually for Boeing, 3 engines on the tailplane. It used many of the fuselage components of the 707 and became the backbone of American domestic transport system in the 1960s and 70s. And it's one of the few commercial jets to have sold over 1,000 aircraft. Captain Don Francisco Romero, Iberia's chief pilot, is flying that. But if the 727 was good, the 737 was brilliant. It's the most successful jet airliner so far, with around 3,300 ordered. About 80 airlines operated, because it has an unusually wide and spacious cabin, and it's an extremely cost-effective, high-performance short-haul aircraft. Boeing kept their development costs down by using many of the 707 and 727 components. And every few years they bring out a new version to meet new legislation on noise and noxious emissions. The unmistakable jumbo. This Singapore Airlines jumbo is the Boeing 747-400, the latest version, and it can carry 421 passengers, up to 40 tons of freight, over 8,000 miles without a refueling stop. If any one aircraft symbolises Heathrow and the age of mass travel, this surely is it. Just 34 years after the DC-3 struggled into the air, the first ever wide-bodied airliner weighing nearly 300 tons took off and changed the face of air travel forever. Boeing are actually looking at plans to stretch the upper deck to add another 150 seats or so. After the jumbo, Air Canada's Boeing 767 looks modest in comparison, but it can carry nearly 300 passengers, and it too had a major impact on long-range travel, using only 2 extremely powerful and efficient engines. In fact, it was Air Canada who pioneered twin-engined operations across the Atlantic with the 767 in 1985, and now 75% of all transatlantic flights are with such aircraft. The Douglas Dakota might still be flying, but it's no match for the company's latest model. Now McDonnell Douglas, the three-engined MD-11, follows up the DC-8 and DC-10 long-range programs with an aircraft that can carry 323 passengers up to 7,800 miles. In recent times, McDonnell Douglas was struggling commercially, but the company that dominated the civil market in the 40s and 50s has bounced back with a huge upturn in orders last year that's once again made it a major force in the industry. It's not all America, though. The A340 represents Europe's highly successful collaborative venture, Airbus Industry, which now has a significant slice of the market with its range of high-tech aircraft. The four-engined A340 and the twin-engined A330 are competing with the 777 and MD-11 in the long-haul sector. It might look like a bloated Boeing 707, but the A340 is one of the most advanced aircraft flying. If there's one modern aircraft that turns heads skywards more than any other, it's still the 27-year-old Concorde, particularly when in formation with the RAF's famous aerobatic display team, the Red Arrows in their Hawk trainers. It's over 50 years since the Royal Aeronautical Society organised the last of the garden parties and flying displays over the old Great West Aerodrome. This big Concorde formation, which is being flown for the first time, is in dramatic contrast to the wood and canvas biplanes that delighted spectators of an earlier age. Well, what an amazing sight. But finally, the British Airways' latest acquisition, the Boeing 777, which is Boeing's first fly-by-wire airliner. It's almost indistinguishable from its main rival, the A330, to all perhaps but the most expert of plane spotters. This is one of only 3 in service with British Airways. They've got another 12 on order, 5 of this, the A version, plus another 7 of the B version, which has a longer range, and they've got options for 15 more.
You join me now on the flight deck of the new Boeing 777. This twin jet will be the last significant multi-passenger aircraft of the millennium. The instruments confronting the flight crew are not the needles and dials of yesteryear, but VDU screens. The displays can be selected from a menu in exactly the way you select the same on your laptop or computer games. In British Airways service, the 777, powered by 2 General Electric G90 turbofans, will carry 325 passengers up to 5,000 miles. Later versions will fly 8,000 miles non-stop. 50 years ago, when Heathrow first became operational as a passenger terminal, the air crews, powered by overstretched piston engines, navigated their way to New York or Sydney or Cape Town or wherever with primitive radio aids and by reference to the stars. In those 50 years, trans-global air travel has changed the world. And throughout those 50 years, the name of London Airport Heathrow has won the respect and admiration of all those aviators who have flown into and out of it. But airports are not just about aeroplanes and runways and buildings, they are about people. And Heathrow's people have every right to celebrate those past 50 years and look forward to the next half century.
Well, the cockpit of 2046 will look very different. Along with a host of new user-friendly control systems, there'll be no window for the pilots to see ahead. That at least is the concept being tested by NASA for its version of the next supersonic transport, a US replacement to Concorde, in other words. But windows with a range of sensors which can illuminate the way ahead in all weathers, day and night, there'll be no need for the droop nose that Concorde uses for takeoff and landing. Work on the concept is already highly advanced. Flight crew from the NASA's Ames Center are flying trials with the new technology on a Boeing 737 demonstrator. The pilot landing the aircraft is in the back and is connected to the outside world via only a camera and screen. New advances in airborne technology will be complemented by other innovations on the ground.
Plans for a new terminal, Terminal 5, have provoked furious opposition among local people and others who claim it would be an environmental catastrophe. BAA argues that without it, Heathrow will lose business. It says Terminal 5 could accommodate around 30 million more passengers a year, and with demand for passenger services expected to double in the not-too-distant future, it would give Heathrow enough capacity to keep it ahead of its European rivals, particularly Paris and Amsterdam. Well, the proposals are currently the subject of a lengthy planning inquiry, and it's expected to be a couple of years before a decision on whether to give the go-ahead is made. The environmental impact of building such a huge facility has to be measured against the financial benefits that it may bring to the local and, of course, to the national economy. Well, that's all in the future. For now, though, I really hope you've enjoyed our look back over the past 50 years. And all that's left for me to say from Europe's busiest airport is goodbye.
Once I get